Top 10 characters who have worn the Venom symbiote, Venom's many heinous hosts. The alien entity that's come to be known as Venom has worn many faces over the years. That's what symbiotes are designed to do, after all. As we dive further into the history of the little black goop that could, we'll see that, originally, Venom was designed to be the perfect parasite. An organism whose primary function was to latch onto a host, empower that host, and subsequently drive it to lash out in acts of violence and savagery. We see this pattern emerge again and again with Venom's many partners, each of which has felt the rage and anger that the symbiote brings out in its victims. After all, why should Venom care what sort of cruelty its host bodies get up to? While the gelatinous inky glop certainly has its weaknesses, the organism is designed to persist after its host body has served its purpose. Though in recent years, Venom's alignment has shifted from cannibalistic evildoer to misunderstood anti-hero, one thing remains ever constant. You don't want to mess with this monstrosity. You can be sure that every person on this list has at one point or another regretted getting mixed up with the infamous symbiotic sludge. Some perhaps more so than others. 10. Carol Danvers. During Norman Osborn's siege of Asgard, things in Broxton, Oklahoma were going absolutely haywire. Not only was the mystical Golden City of the Gods parked a few miles away, but the town had become ground zero for one of the most high-powered battles the planet had ever seen. So when Spidey found Venom tearing and chewing through Asgardian forces, he baited them away from the center of the battle to try and take the gobbling goop down one-on-one. Miss Marvel soon arrived to help Peter take down one of Osborn's strongest cronies, figuring two fists would be better than one. Without flinching, Carol reached deep into Venom's gullet and ripped their host clean out through the esophagus. At this point, Venom was being helmed by Gargan, who we'll get to later. But more importantly, after having its host forcibly removed, the symbiote was frantically in need of a replacement. It leapt instantly at Miss Marvel. "Get this crap off me!" she screamed to Spidey as she began to feel the alien wrest control over her body. Once the attachment was complete, Venom stretched back and laughed. "I like this," they snarled. "She's an excellent host, so full of energy." Desperate and out of ideas, Spidey led this terrifying new Venom on a chase around town until he could think of a plan. "Ha! We can fly!" Venom yelled as they took to the skies with Carol's powers. "Miss Marvel is now my favorite superhero!" The monstrosity rang out as it chased Spidey to and fro. Eventually, Spidey was able to overload Venom's control of Carol by pushing them into a nearby power line, crippling the symbiote's structural integrity and supercharging Carol to the point where she could burst forth from Venom's grasp. This union might have been brief, but it represents one of Venom's most powerful and terrifying partnerships. Should the symbiote have kept hold of Carol, it's possible they could have become unstoppable together. 9. Gwen Stacy. On Earth 6-5, the home of the famous Spider-Gwen, the jet-black symbiote known as Venom looks and acts a little differently from the one we all know and love. Don't worry, it's still the same murderous, horrifying parasite at heart. Its origins are just a little less out of this world. For one, it's not an alien so much as a bioweapon created in a lab. Gwen explains how exposure to my radioactive power-ups tore the lizard DNA out of Harry Osborn, mutated it into something new. Venom. A hybrid. All the abilities of Spider-Woman, plus the regenerative powers of the lizard. As it always goes with alternate universes, things are nearly the same with slight differences here and there. But one thing never changes. Venom is a murderous force of nature, bar none. When the inky organism bonds to Earth 6-5's Wolverine, Spider-Gwen and Kitty Pryde are forced into action. Once Kitty phases Logan out of the symbiote's grasp, it heads right for the next juiciest target, Gwen herself. She activates the ultrasonic device designed to subdue Venom, but the goo just isn't having it. It lunges at Gwen with a ferocity that strikes fear in her heart. Before Gwen can even react, it's grappled her in a jet-black web and begins the process of taking control. Out of options, Gwen does the only thing she can think to do. She starts blasting music. The sound waves aren't enough to stop the bonding process, but do act as a deterrent, leaving Gwen with one solid hand on the wheel when she emerges from her symbiotic cocoon. And thus, Gwenom was born. Well, back in black. An evil Matt Murdock muses as he watches Gwenom emerge from their metamorphosis. "Actually," Gwenom says as they zip to Murdock's throat, "I feel great." Gwen and her own personal Venom symbiote not only shared a sick costume, they would stay bonded for an impressive amount of time. Of all Venom's partnerships, Spider-Gwen managed to keep the monster at bay far more effectively than most. And while her bond might not have technically been with the same alien as the rest of the folks on our list, there's no doubt that Gwen was fighting the same battle while attached to the carnivorous Clag. But before we see who else has worn the oozing outfit over the years, be sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications on to never miss an upload, and smash that like button for some plot armor today. Now, let's get back to the action. 8. Mac Gargan. Most of you may recognize the name Mac Gargan from one of Spider-Man's oldest and least intimidating foes, the Scorpion. Although Gargan and his green stinger certainly gave Spidey a run for his money now and again, on the whole, the Scorpion never quite reached such fearsome heights as villains like the Green Goblin or Doc Ock. But when the symbiote approached Mac and offered him the chance to earn his spot in the big leagues, he happily took it. Mac, as a willing and delighted host, made a perfect fit for Venom. And though Mac's Scorpion days have delivered lackluster results, his psychopathic disregard for human life and egotistical desire to rise in the supervillain ranks made him and the symbiote a perfect pairing. Soon, during the first superhuman civil war, Mac would join the Thunderbolts as one of their most powerful recruits, aiding the government in tracking down rogue vigilantes and unauthorized superheroes. However, no matter how much Gargan loved the attention and the raw power that came with the symbiote, after some time, Mac grew to be quite fearful of his partner. "Sometimes I can't believe I ever got myself into this," he admitted. "And sometimes I can't believe I lived this long without it." Gargan served as Venom for an extremely extended period of time, longer than most people would ever consider being bonded to a symbiote of that strength. But Mac proved his worth again and again to his superiors, dutifully serving Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers as a faithful, if frothing, attack dog. As a part of the Dark Avengers team, Venom took the role of Spider-Man and was even hailed as a hero. It was all part of Osborn's masterful plan to trick the populace into believing his band of bullies were actually the same heroes the planet had always known. Norman even helped Mac control the symbiote by introducing Skrull DNA into his system, allowing Gargan to willfully choose his form rather than be stuck as the terrifying creature he'd become after spending so long bonded with the alien slime. Funnily enough, we've already witnessed the end of Gargan's tenure as the Black and White Behemoth. His final fight as Venom would be at the gates of Asgard during Osborn's siege, when Miss Marvel ripped him from the suit and Spider-Man subsequently deep-fried it. After the siege of Asgard, Mac would be permanently separated from the suit and imprisoned for his many, many abhorrent crimes. 7. Anne Weying. Anne Weying is perhaps one of the most tragic hosts the Venom symbiote has ever encountered. The ex-wife of Eddie Brock, a name you know we'll be returning to later. Anne was first brought into the fray when Spider-Man sought out her help in locating her ex-husband while Eddie was on a rampage as Venom. This is where Weying not only learns of the Venom symbiote's existence, but witnesses its power firsthand. Later, wounded and hunted by the murderous zealot named Sin Eater, Eddie spirits his injured ex-wife into the night. When they reach their hiding spot, Eddie realizes Anne's wounds are bleeding profusely. Unable to think of any other way to help her in time, Eddie lets the symbiote engulf Anne's wounds and allow its healing properties to save her. Anne is, understandably, incredibly resistant to this idea. "It's horrid," she protests. "I saw what it did to you. It changed you. It made you..." Oh. As the symbiote flows over her, she suddenly feels the pain in her stomach soothe. She relaxes in Eddie's arms. "Oh, Eddie," she says. "It's so warm and soothing, like a nice hot bath." Eventually, it becomes clear that to save Weying, Eddie must detach from his other entirely and allow it to bond with his former lover. Eddie doesn't hesitate in saving Anne's life, demanding the symbiote bond with her. The creation of She-Venom would jolt Anne to consciousness, and she would quickly murder several thugs attacking the helpless Eddie. When the symbiote releases Weying and returns to Eddie, she is repulsed and horrified at her actions. "I did that! I did that! That thing made me do that!" Eddie disagrees, telling Anne, "It can't make you do anything you don't really want to do." This unsurprisingly doesn't help. Anne forswears the suit and yells at Eddie, "Stay away from me! What did you do to me? I hate you forever!" After this event, Anne would only bond with the symbiote one other time, though the alien would again soon be forced to leave her in order to save Eddie's life. After these two traumatic experiences, it all proved too much for Weying, who, in a fit of despair, threw herself from her apartment window after witnessing Venom and Spider-Man do battle for the third time. Her suicide would be a tragedy beyond words and would reignite Eddie Brock's hatred for Peter Parker once more. 6. Otto Octavius. Even well-established villains in their own right aren't safe from Venom's prying eyes. Although when Otto Octavius found himself possessed by the alien parasite, he happened to be living inside of Peter Parker's body. It's a long story, one that we have a whole video on if you're interested. For our purposes today, suffice to say Otto was trying his very best to be the greatest Spider-Man of them all when he found himself face to face with one of his predecessor's most dangerous foes. Having been in the extremely responsible possession of one Flash Thompson as Ancient Venom, Otto decided the symbiote would be better served in his hands. He ambushed Ancient Venom, stole the alien goop, and locked it in his lab for testing. Of course, everything went horribly wrong when the symbiote, enraged at its treatment, broke free from its cage and charged straight at Spidey. Otto, with no previous experience of fending off Venom, was helpless to resist as he was turned into a being that took to calling itself the Superior Venom. From there, things went from bad to worse as the Superior Venom took to the streets, mercilessly beating any and all common criminals he came across. Interestingly, though Doc Ock was one of Spidey's most dastardly and ingenious villains, Otto did not immediately resort to murder while under the influence of the murderous mucus. This is likely because of the Superior Spider-Man's genuine belief in justice rather than vengeance, inherited from the body's previous owner. Regardless, it didn't take long before Venom's more violent tendencies began to get the better of Otto, particularly when Mary Jane reprimanded him over his recent behavior. Ultimately, the Avengers had to be called in to take care of the Superior Venom, a feat which they were only barely able to achieve with the help of the ghost of Peter Parker, who assisted Otto in throwing off the symbiote in a rare moment of clarity and strength. Once rejected, Venom returned to the more than capable hands of Flash Thompson. We'll get to Flash too, I promise. 5. Conrad Marcus. We take a quick detour now to journey to another alternate universe, albeit probably a more familiar one. The Ultimate Universe that existed parallel Marvel's Prime continuity for a time was the original home for the one and only Miles Morales. Now a world-famous wall crawler in his own right, Miles' origins were exceptionally chronicled in his own Ultimate Spider-Man series before his introduction alongside Peter Parker in the Prime Marvel Universe. It was in this Ultimate Universe that a scientist named Conrad Marcus turned himself into Venom after realizing that it was his genetically altered spider that gave Spider-Man his powers. His first use of the symbiote's strength was to murder a reporter, one Betty Brandt, who was close to breaking the story. Afterwards, Conrad went after the man who he believed to be Spider-Man, Miles' father, Jefferson Davis. Arriving just in time, Miles was barely able to save his father from the monstrosity Conrad had transformed himself into. After a prolonged and brutal fight, Jefferson was rushed to the hospital, and Miles and his mother, Rio Morales, followed anxiously behind. Unfortunately for everyone involved, Venom followed too. Miles once again rushed to the defense of his hospitalized father and fought Venom blow for blow in a battle that more than lived up to the Venom vs. Spider-Man hype. After literally eating Miles, the young wall crawler uses a Venom blast to tear the symbiote up from the inside, stunning both the alien menace and forcing Marcus out into the open. The police opened fire upon Marcus, killing him instantly. Tragically, Miles' mother was caught in the crossfire as the police rushed to take down Marcus, and she quickly succumbed to her wounds, dying in Miles' arms. While Venom's introduction into Peter Parker's world quickly established him as a major villain in the Spider-Man mythos, Miles' experience with the sinister slime ball in the Ultimate Universe was far more personal and devastating. Not only was Venom one of the most powerful and terrifying villains Miles ever faced, but his first encounter with Venom not only nearly cost him his father, but resulted in the tragic and senseless death of Miles' mother. 4. Dylan Brock. Before we dive into Dylan Brock's story, let me just say how thrilled I am that we've finally reached Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman's Venom run, because it's far and away the best Venom book in recent memory. But anyway, on with the show. Remember when Anne Wang became She-Venom? Well, surprise! The transfer of the symbiote from Eddie's body to hers somehow managed to impregnate Wang with her and Eddie's biological son. Though, because of the abnormal origins of the pregnancy, Dylan is also technically the direct descendant of the Venom symbiote as well. As a triple threat son of the first Venom, the first She-Venom, and the symbiotic entity itself, Dylan Brock is as close to a perfect fit for the symbiote as you could possibly imagine. However, for most of his life, the boy was brought up under false pretenses. Dylan was sent to live with his grandfather by Anne when he was born, shortly before she took her own life. Eddie didn't even know Dylan existed until he found himself on the run from the law and captured on the lawn of his father Carl's house. It was there that Eddie first caught a glimpse of his son, though he didn't yet understand their true connection. Upon their first official meeting, Dylan has been brought up believing that Carl was in fact his own dad, and that he and Eddie were actually brothers. Though upon learning that he had any other family members at all, Dylan promptly sought out Eddie and asked him to help kill Carl, for Carl proved to be a heavily abusive father to both his sons. Once Eddie and Dylan left their dirtbag dad in the, well, dirt, things for the father-son duo got even more complicated. See, it turns out there's this ancient elder god who created the symbiotes in the first place. His name is Null. He's bad news. The worst news, in fact. And when he finally broke free of his intergalactic prison, he came straight for the prodigal son of the symbiotes. Null nearly managed to get his claws on the boy too, which would have been disastrous. But through the valiant attempts of the world's heroes, and most of all Venom, Null never managed to fully corrupt Dylan. After Null was defeated and the apocalyptic crisis averted, Dylan stepped up and took his father's legacy, though by necessity rather than choice. Originally, the plan was to let the symbiote guard Dylan but not bond with him. But after Dylan took a stray bullet, the symbiote was forced to bond with him to save the boy's life. From that moment forth, Dylan was crowned the official one and only Venom. Dylan serves as the symbiote's partner to this day, and his part of the story is just beginning. 3. Peter Parker. What is there to say about Peter Benjamin Parker that hasn't already been said? While Pete wasn't the original wielder of the symbiote that would come to be known as Venom, he was the host that first brought the alien to Earth, and his life would forever be intertwined with the symbiotic sludge. The story of Spider-Man and his infamous black suit is legend, but what would only be a brief chapter in Venom's existence would turn out to perhaps be the most influential of all. During the Secret Wars of 1984, Spidey happened to stumble across the strange alien suit while searching for a replacement for his own tattered red and blue spandex. Spider-Man quickly learned that this fancy new costume had some pretty impressive tricks up its sleeve. For one, it could generate its own webbing and came stocked with a seemingly infinite supply. The suit could also change its appearance on command with just a thought from its wearer. Future Venoms would use this feature to easily disguise themselves to escape detection or to suit up on the fly. Spider-Man originally was most excited about the possibility of short sleeves for summer. Of course, eventually the love affair between Peter and his new suit would soon cool to an icy apprehension. The first cracks in the partnership began to show when the symbiote started wearing Peter's body out at night to fight crime while Peter slept. During this time, Spidey would dream of being torn apart by two giant deific figures, one in the form of his original costume and one as the symbiote. Quickly, Peter made the cool-headed decision to get the suit looked out by Mr. Fantastic, who was the first to break the news to Spidey that his suit was actually a living thing in and of itself. By the time Peter realized that he needed to lose the suit pronto, the bond between Parasite and Host had already grown substantially, both in terms of time spent together and in terms of genuine familiarity. The two grew close while working together, even if one side of the partnership never knew the other was a living, thinking being. The only way Spidey was eventually able to free himself from the Goop's grasp was by bringing the suit to a church tower and letting the sonic cacophony of the bells weaken the alien to the point of retreat. Though the symbiote was forced to withdraw from its host that day, and Parker's rejection would not be something it would soon forgive, it was not killed atop that church tower as Peter assumed. As for where the suit went next, well, that story is waiting for us just a little further up ahead. Interestingly, even after their hostile parting of ways, Peter continued to wear cloth imitations of his jet black suit. Perhaps it was simply that he had grown used to his new look, or that he found the black suit more intimidating than his classic one. But maybe, just maybe, something deep inside of Peter missed his silent collaborator. 2. Flash Thompson. Flash Thompson entered Spider-Man comics not as a host to the venomous alien symbiote, but as Peter Parker's schoolyard bully all the way back in Spidey's debut issue, before he even had his own series. As the star football player in BMOC at Midtown High, Flash made Peter's life difficult as the school's resident bookworm. In an ironic twist, however, Flash was always portrayed as an avid Spider-Man fan. As Peter put it, "Sometimes I do realize that God has a sense of humor, and I actually get the joke." This idolization of the wall crawler eventually led Flash to join the army, seeking honor and recognition, but also looking to simply make a difference in the world. This decision wouldn't pan out quite as gloriously as Flash had hoped, and while serving overseas, he witnessed many atrocities that sent him into deep despair. This, coupled with the amputation of both his legs below the knees, seemed to be the end of Flash Thompson's heroic endeavors. In reality, they would only be the beginning. Flash was offered a chance to bond with the Venom symbiote by the US government, and the young veteran jumped at the chance. The result would be a government-subsidized program nicknamed Agent Venom. In some ways, it seemed like Flash had gotten his dream of becoming Spider-Man after all. Though, due not only to the government's direct involvement, but also to Flash's military training, Agent Venom would be a highly militaristic form of Venom. While other Venoms are creatures of the deepest, darkest hatred, Agent Venom was much the opposite. He was cool, collected, and precise. Once, while the symbiote was attached to Eddie Brock, he admits about Thompson. It thinks about you, the other, all the time. It doesn't think I know that, but I do. I can feel it. It's just tough being someone's second best, you know? This is a hugely important reveal, as it speaks volumes to Thompson and the symbiote's connection. Though the two were brought together to perform surgically emotionless missions of war, a deep and lasting connection would be formed between the symbiote and Flash. But the true legacy of Agent Venom was showing the superhuman community once and for all that it's the pilot, not the plane. Flash Thompson used the symbiote so effectively and honorably that he proved to the world that Venom could be a force for good rather than violence. He proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the symbiote was not inherently evil, but amplified the energies of its host. As such a paragon of virtue, the Avengers made Agent Venom their very first envoy within the Guardians of the Galaxy. An office Flash served with distinction, forging friendships that would last a lifetime. During a confrontation with Norman Osborn, Flash gave his life to defeat the insane mastermind, saying in his final moments, "Parker, listen to me. That suit's good now. Or can be. I know. I helped make it that way. Don't let your rage infect it. Don't you be the reason it goes bad again." Later, during the King in Black fiasco, Flash would return from the grave. And currently, the football star turned intergalactic Avengers future is wide open. 1. Eddie Brock. Finally, folks, we reach the most famous and influential Venom of them all. Of course, as the most famous version of the long-tongued Colossus, Eddie's origin story is well known and widely adapted. First appearing in the final pages of Amazing Spider-Man 299, Eddie debuted his full Venom form by breaking into Peter Parker's apartment and terrifying Mary Jane as she returned home from work. This immediately solidified him as one of Spider-Man's newest and most horrifying villains, and shocked fans, revealing that Venom somehow knew Spidey's secret identity. During his first official outing as Spidey's newest nemesis, Venom revealed his identity as Eddie Brock, an up-and-coming reporter for the Daily Bugle. That is, until the piece that served as his biggest break was proved a farce by Spider-Man. Distraught at the state of his crumbling career, Brock was driven into a deep depression. Ultimately, at the end of his rope, I decided to end it all. It was on that fateful day, praying for forgiveness on the steps of a local chapel, that Eddie was visited by the recently rejected symbiote. He describes the experience as though a shadow moved, caressed me. I was joined, but this was a shadow filled with light. It clarified my anguish, focused my purpose. Its hatred for you matched my own. It knew who you were, and it had power. Oh, such power. And with that, a partnership for the ages was struck. Originally brought together by a shared hatred for Peter Parker, neither half of Venom could scarcely imagine the journey they were embarking on. Eddie and the symbiote would share countless highs and lows together, more often than not serving as an antagonist to Peter in his ongoing adventures as Spidey. His tenure as the web-swinging symbiote would certainly be the longest of any other host, and as a result, his version of Venom would become the most iconic and recognizable form of the villain of all time. Among the most notable occurrences during Eddie's tenure would be the emergence of fellow symbiote-based scoundrel Carnage, whose birth would bring Venom and Spider-Man together for the first time as allies, albeit short-lived ones. Of course, modern Venom is best known for his anti-heroic tendencies, which were first introduced when Eddie was inducted by a group of homeless citizens to serve as their neighborhood watch and protector. As the character of Venom grew in popularity, so too did his heroic deeds, eventually culminating in the recent King in Black event. Arguably Eddie's most direct moment in the spotlight, the return of Null represented a chance for the one-time villain to prove to the universe that he had outgrown his hateful origins. Eddie did all of this and more. Not only did he nearly give his life trying to keep the demonic god of darkness at bay, Eddie was eventually chosen by the Enigma Force to lead the fight against Null firsthand. As if that wasn't enough, Venom even dual-wielded both Mjolnir and the Silver Surfer's legendary board against Null as the all-powerful deity attempted to raise the universe itself of light and life. Eddie would single-handedly strike down Null, and in doing so, gained godlike command over all the symbiotes of the universe. Thus, as it currently stands, Eddie is acting as a stand-in divine controller of the entire universe's symbiotic entities. In short, he's the god of the goops. Eddie Brock's decades-long transformation from villain to anti-hero into literal deity is one of the most breathtaking character arcs in comics. His iconic depictions and bone-chilling visage across the years have more than solidified Eddie Brock as the one true Venom we all know and love. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Who of our hosts was your favorite Venom, and why? Let us know in the comments. On behalf of all of us here at Plot Armor Comics, we hope you have a great day.